to a hidden biological universe. It's this bustling, wildly complex living world that completely surrounds us, exists right on us, and even lives inside us. The crazy part? It is entirely invisible to our naked eye. Seriously, take a quick second and just look around the room. Imagine what you'd see right now if that invisible world suddenly snapped into focus and became visible. How would it change your understanding of size or complexity, or even your basic definition of what counts as being alive? You know, we're so used to judging life by the beautiful plants and animals we can easily spot. But today, we're going to push way past the limits of our natural sight.
Here's our quick itinerary for today. We're hitting the invisible world revealed, building blocks, the cell, plant versus animal cells, meet the microorganisms, nature's ultimate recyclers, and finally, microbes in your kitchen.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the invisible world revealed.
For the longest time, humanity was naturally curious about the tiny things around us, but we were kind of stuck, right? We were fundamentally limited by our own biology. We needed a technological breakthrough to actually peer into the microscopic scale. And then, in the 1660s, a massive leap happened. A scientist named Robert Hooke used a microscope to look at a super thin slice of cork. He noticed it was made of all these tiny, empty spaces that reminded him of a honeycomb, so he actually coined the term cell to describe them. Around that exact same time, a Dutch scientist named Antony van Leeuwenhoek created way better lenses. His microscopes made things look 200 to 300 times bigger. Because of that, he became the very first person to clearly see and describe living microscopic things, like bacteria, rightfully earning him the title of the father of microbiology.
Moving right along to Section 2, building blocks, the cell.
So, thanks to those early pioneers, we finally knew these tiny spaces existed. But what exactly are they doing, and why are they so incredibly important to us? Well, simply put, the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. It makes up the body of all living organisms, every single living being you have ever laid eyes on. From the tallest tree outside to the smallest ant, and yep, even your own body, is intricately built from these microscopic units. They are literally the fundamental Legos of life. And a cell isn't just some simple bag of liquid. It operates a lot like a highly complex factory. First up, we've got the cell membrane. This is a porous boundary that safely allows essential materials to enter and waste to exit, kind of like security at the front gate. Then, right in the middle, we have the nucleus. Think of it as the boss, or the control center. It regulates all the activities and the growth within the cell. Finally, there's the cytoplasm. This is the space filling the cell that contains carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. This is essentially your bustling factory floor where the actual life processes take place.
Next up, Section 3, plant versus animal cells.
Now, while all cells share those core basics we just talked about, plants and animals live totally different lifestyles, right? So they naturally require fundamentally different structural designs to survive. Animal cells, for instance, are quite flexible. But plant cells, they're packing an extra super thick outer layer called the cell wall. This wall gives plants crucial rigidity and strength, which is exactly how they're able to stand up so tall. You'll also find a massive, empty-looking space called a vacuole in plant cells for storing substances and keeping their shape, something animal cells generally lack or just have really tiny versions of. And, super importantly, plant cells contain these green, rod-shaped structures called chloroplasts. These hold chlorophyll, which is the magic ingredient plants use to perform photosynthesis.
Let's zoom in even further. In Section 4, meet the microorganisms.
Okay, we are shifting gears here from the cells that build larger bodies to independent organisms that consist of just a single cell or a tiny cluster of cells. These are living things you absolutely cannot see unless you magnify them 100 to 400 times. The diversity here is wild. We have fungi, which can look like branched filaments with little sac-like or brush-like structures under a microscope. We've got algae, which are often spherical and actually contain that green chlorophyll we just mentioned. Then there are bacteria, coming in all sorts of crazy shapes: spherical, spiral, comma, or rod-shaped. And they often have these long, hair-like structures to help them swim around. And of course, we have protozoa, which are highly mobile, single-celled organisms. Seriously, they are absolutely everywhere.
Before we get into what they actually do, I want to share a super cool piece of scientific heritage. Long before Hooke or Leeuwenhoek ever invented their microscopes, ancient Indian texts, specifically the Vedas, conceptually recognized these entities. They actually used the word krimi to describe tiny entities, explicitly categorizing them as both drishya, meaning visible, and adrishya, meaning invisible. They even figured out and noted their beneficial and harmful effects way back then. How amazing is that? Which brings us to Section 5, Nature's Ultimate Recyclers.
These tiny, invisible microbes power massive, absolute vital changes in our visible macroscopic world. Think of them as nature's totally unpaid sanitation department. Ever noticed how fallen leaves in a forest eventually just disappear? That's microbes at work. They break down the complex substances of dead plants and animal waste into simpler nutrients. This whole process of decomposition returns nutrients straight back into the soil to help brand new plants grow. But wait, it gets better. In oxygen-free environments, certain bacteria break down household wastewater and release a mixture of gases, mostly methane and carbon dioxide. This is known as biogas. This invisible process literally creates a usable fuel source for cooking, heating, and generating electricity.
Now, when a lot of us hear the word microbe, we immediately think of harmful germs that make us sick. And sure, those definitely exist, but we really have to contrast that creepy germ stereotype with the massive amount of genuinely helpful microbes out there. A perfect example is this brilliant little bacteria called rhizobium. It actually lives inside the swollen root nodules of legumes, think peas, beans, and lentils. It acts as a totally natural fertilizer by trapping nitrogen straight from the air and making it useful for the plant. It keeps the soil incredibly healthy for farmers, and it does it all without a single drop of artificial chemical fertilizer.
Finally, bringing it all home with Section 6, Microbes in Your Kitchen.
You might not even realize it, but you intentionally use these invisible little helpers almost every single day to prep your favorite meals. Let's do a quick kitchen science experiment to prove it. Here is the setup. Take 2 bowls, let's call them A and B, and put 200 grams of flour and a pinch of sugar in each. Next, add some warm water and knead them both into a soft dough. Now here is the critical step. Add a small amount of yeast powder to bowl A only. Leave bowl B completely alone. And then, we just wait a few hours.
Look at the dramatic difference. The bowl we left alone is totally flat and unchanged, but the bowl with the yeast, it has risen and become this incredibly soft, fluffy dough. Why does this happen? Well, yeast is actually a living fungus. It respires and breaks down the food in the dough to release energy, and during that process, it essentially exhales, releasing carbon dioxide gas. Those invisible gas bubbles get trapped in the dough, causing the whole thing to puff up beautifully.
That right there is literal everyday microbe magic. Without the fungi known as yeast, you can say goodbye to soft breads, fluffy cakes, and pastries. And fungi aren't the only ones helping out. A very specific bacteria called lactobacillus is entirely responsible for turning your regular milk into thick, delicious curd. It's also the exact same secret behind fermenting the batter that gives you your perfect morning idli or dosa. Our kitchens are effectively microscopic biological factories.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. After seeing how cells build absolutely all life, and how microbes decompose our waste, create our fuel, and even cook our food, I want to leave you with this question. What would actually happen if microorganisms simply did not exist on Earth? The sobering truth is, nature's entire recycling system would shut down. The soil would die, and life as we know it would just grind to a complete halt. So the next time you look around, remember to appreciate that hidden, invisible living world that is quietly holding our entire visible world together. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep that curiosity alive.